The worship of a deity can be an external or internal action, thereby giving rise to two forms of worship: internal and external forms of worship. Objects, names, and forms default to our thought process. It's much easier to perform external worship by adoring a deity, etched out in a stone, brass, silver, or in a different alloy. Now, what is worship? True meaning of worship, as defined in the Gita and the Upanishad, is you being responsible for your own actions and letting the confluence of energies permeating all around help with the outcome. If you're a believer in a higher power guiding those confluence of energies, then you can call that confluence of energies as God and give it a name and form. If you're a true spiritualist, you would not worry too much about naming that confluence, but instead just acknowledge that your action, and by that I mean even your thoughts, trigger a cascading chain of effects beyond just your immediate vicinity or even time constraints. You may have no visibility or even control of such cascading effects. Those cascading effects crisscross and lead to an outcome. If the outcome you like goes according to your wish, then for a believer in God, your faith is enhanced. If the outcome is not to your liking, some may end up becoming disbelievers. And some may think that God is putting you through a testing period. But again, for the true spiritualist, none of these matter. Good or bad, they're just outcomes. And the spiritualist continues to perform the next thoughtful action repeatedly and goes on with life. In a nutshell, I just summarized the entire Gita to you. Now, coming back to worship. In an external worship, a deity or a vigraha provides you with semblance or comfort. That deity represents that higher power of the confluence of energies. It is an anchor for a superior force of protection. The external action of worship helps you to focus and tap into that power for comfort. When done often during the day, worship leads to discipline. The energy gained permeates with you, keeping you at peace. At the least, worship is usually done in the morning and in the evening. An internal worship is when you contemplate on a personal form internally. You visualize that form. The silence between the thoughts is the anchor, not an external form. An internal action is not constrained by place or time. You get into the mode on demand. Internal worship is a prescribed approach for a direct experience of divinity, primarily because in an internal worship, you become one with the universal person or Purusha or cosmic entity. The effects of an internal worship remain longer. However, external worship is easy to perform. Offerings are made during an external worship, and the offerings are influenced by tradition and religious practices. The prime motive for offerings is to adore the deity you admire with love and respect. Traditional practices equate the worship of a vigraha to that of a loving guest. The Hindu tradition gives a great respect to the treatment of a guest, also called atithi, a guest who is welcome even at an inopportune time. The characteristics of auspiciousness is independent of time or tithi. The spiritual text Gita Upanishad highlights the treatment and the respect to be given to a guest. Everything you would do for a loving guest, you would do it for a deity in an external worship. Let us say you have a guest coming to your home whom you just adore, look up to, respect, and leave no stone unturned, as they say, in the hospitality of that guest. Look at some of the things you may want to do for such a loving guest. And as I describe them, see about the similarities to what a priest would do in a temple for a deity. To invite a loving guest, you would decorate the house with flowers of various colors. give out a pleasing, bright, natural, and festive appearance. Number 2, you would spread a sweet and pleasant fragrance in the house by lighting incense sticks or agarbattis. As a responsible and hospitable host, you would offer water to quench the thirst. Number 4, the guest would take a nice bath, pampered with sandalwood, butter, honey, milk, yogurt, you name it. Number 5, you would provide a clean cloth or a towel for wiping. Number 6, the guest is seated in a well-lit place illuminated by lights. Number 7, the guest is served with mouth-watering dishes cooked with love, without any expectations, with fruits. Number 8, after the food there is an interaction. The host highlights the desirable qualities and the characteristics of the guest. Then family members assemble to bring and sing the riveting characteristics of the guest. And at the conclusion of all the festivities, the guest is then given a room to take rest. Finally, stories highlighting the many acts of compassion, valor, and greatness of the guest is described and recited. The Hindu tradition adopts the Atithi practices during the worship of a deity. Look at the same 11 steps I covered. Number 1, flowers and garlands of various colors and patterns are offered. This is called Pushpam Samarpayami. Incense sticks or agarbattis are lighted. These sticks are circled 3 times to symbolize the deity having the powers of manifestation, sustenance, and dissolution of the cosmic universe. This is called Dhupam Samarpayami. Number 3, water is offered to the deity. This is called Jalam Samarpayami or Argyam Samarpayami. Number 4, the deity is bathed with water, sometimes with sandalwood paste, milk, yogurt, honey, butter, and sugar. This is called Gandham Samarpayami or Snanam Samarpayami. Next, you would use a cloth to wipe the deity clean and also dress it up. This is called Vastram Samarpayami. Then many wicks are dipped in oil or clarified butter and lighted and kept in front of the deity. This is called Deepam Samarpayami. You do this to highlight the deity. Fruits and offerings are made to the deity. This is called Phalam or Naivedyam Samarpayami. You are offering food to the deity, same way you would do it for a guest. Then the wonderful characteristics and energy of the deity are highlighted through the recitation of mantras. This is done through different hymns of the verses of the Vedas. This is where you would hear hymns of the Samaveda being recited. Then you would have bhajans or devotional songs are chanted with arti, wicks lighted in a plate and showed to the deity so that the face and the characteristics are visible. And then you would put the deity on a cushioned bed accompanied by pleasing and melodious music. This is called Lali, meaning a song to put a child to bed. And lastly, you would have stories of philosophy, compassion, valor, love being shared. This is called Pravachana. There you go. The same 11 steps you would do for a loving guest, you would do for a deity. Because in an external form of worship, you would adore the deity with all of this. Now you're expected to perform all of this with love and commitment. There has to be an internal connection to bring the external form of worship closer to the harder internal form of worship. Worship has to be with willingness. The emotional state is one of treating with love versus indifference. Worship with love brings peace and bliss, whereas worship with indifference is a chore, it is work. Do you have to go through this elaborate process to worship a deity? Well, with all these offerings and spend all this time? Not necessarily. However, it is in your mindset. And that matters most. If you like to do it, do it. As Krishna says in the Gita, offering with devotion, even a leaf, flower, fruit, or just plain water. As Krishna's role of divinity of the universe, Krishna will delightfully partake in that article offered with love. Traditions are there for a reason. And the intention is not to dispel those traditions, but to also make you understand and make everybody know of the message of the Gita and the Upanishad, that traditions have a personal context to it, has a rationale to it, and not mixing up tradition with spirituality is key. As long as tradition is used as a vehicle, as an anchor to help with spirituality, then that's great. But relying only on tradition and not being spiritual, unfortunately, is not the message of the Gita and the Upanishad. A spiritual seeker, an inquirer of truth, stays true to the Gita and the Upanishad. If that's your intention, then you have come to the right place. Enjoy this journey. Enjoy your inquiry of truth. I will talk to you soon. Thank you.